member of our church stopped by for a surprise visit, and I was sitting downstairs chatting and completely lost track of time. So
That's okay.
Okay, everyone, we're about to go live on Facebook.
I didn't make any screens, like, just so you know, I forgot to, now that I'm sitting here. All live, all day.
So you all can start whenever you want.
Are all the attendees invited in?
can everybody see us? How does this?
It's a webinar, not a meeting. I just want to make sure all the attendees are not sitting in the waiting room. That's all. I think that they can, I think that they're in. Oh yeah, okay, they're in. All right, we're good. Lisa, you're on mute, so you should come off mute and start. They're all here. Yay. Okay.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the fourth part of our Advent series on harm reduction and looking at the situation in Ohio with overdose deaths. And this tonight's theme in this fourth Sunday of Advent is our call to action. So Wendy, if you want to just open us up with a little bit on the past of what we've been doing in this series, and then we will start with our first panelist.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leisha. My name is Wendy Tarr. I'm the director of the Vincentian Ohio Action Network, and we're pleased to be sponsoring this series of webinars. We are working in partnership with a number of faith communities in Central and Southeast Ohio, working on harm reduction. And we did a series called Do No Harm just a few months ago. And we're talking a lot about naloxone and what does it do and how does it function and how does it work? And what are some of the ways that people in the community can be a part of helping to distribute that? And so for Advent, we wanted to have some ongoing conversations around that topic. And so this is our fourth installment, obviously the fourth Sunday on Advent before Christmas. And so thank you for all the pastors who have taken place and faith leaders that have taken part of this, helping to contribute your thoughts and your reflections. We have posted the first three Advent sessions on our website. So if you go to thinktanksonpoverty.com and you go to initiatives at the top, you'll see the Do No Harm webinar series. And when you click on that, you'll be able to see not only all of the videos from our Do No Harm series, but also the Advent videos, if you happen to have missed any. We're also live streaming on Facebook, which I know is where most people are probably catching this. And so it's pasted on all of our Think Tank pages and on our ARCH program, which is a reentry program in Central Ohio that we run. We are, one of the things I think that's interesting, there was an article just a few days ago that Ohio is on track to break the all-time high annual record of overdoses in 2020. 2020 has been a terrible year for so many reasons, but we've been struggling as a state around overdose deaths, and unfortunately, we are continuing to grow that number. And I think the coronavirus and the isolation and all of the complicated situations that surrounding this virus is making is causing a lot of difficulty for folks that struggle with with addiction or, the isolation and the loneliness and all of that. And so it's really, really urgent for our communities that we're working hard to continue to educate and to work on getting naloxone out to people. It's the medication that reverses an overdose. So we're just thankful for you tuning in with us tonight as we talk about what faith communities can do. And I'm going to pass it back over to Leisha.
Thank you, Wendy. Our first panelist tonight is Joshua Lawson from Portsmouth, Ohio. Josh has been really a trailblazer in Ohio in this work, so we're really pleased to have Josh with us tonight. So Josh, please talk to us about the work that you've been doing and how you see this work fitting into the work of the church.
Sure. Well, I want to take a minute to say thanks, Leisha and Wendy and all the others who have helped to organize this series. I think it's a very important work that you're doing to try to engage the faith community, specifically here in Ohio, in the task of harm reduction. I think the faith community has tremendous potential to fill a need here, both from a theological perspective and point of view. People of faith have a very wide and broad and rich basis, I think, on which to engage this work. But there are gaps still remaining across the state where I think we can do better to get people involved. And so I want to thank you all for the work that you're doing in that. How I've been involved in this work over the past 2 to 3 years has been primarily through 3 avenues. One as a pastor of Evangelical United Church of Christ in Portsmouth, Ohio. Second, as a regional clergy coordinator and community organizer for Faith and Public Life, Ohio. And third, as a chairperson for the faith-based subcommittee of the Sauter County Collaborative Opioid Consortium. So all 3 of those avenues kind of diverge and overlap for me, around this mission in the community of harm reduction. How we've been able to do it in terms of naloxone distribution in our county is through the work of what we call a faith recovery navigator. Through the church that I've pastored, we've really worked hard over the year and a half to kind of create a culture of awareness in terms of recovery related work and harm reduction in our county. Actually sought to align the church's mission with the mission of the recovery community in our county. And so we were able to secure a few things to which to do that practically through the Project Dawn expansion in our county, which I'm sure many of the listeners and the attendees of this series are familiar with already through other speakers on this panel in this series. Project Dawn is the state-funded program. It's an acronym. It stands for Deaths Avoided with Naloxone. It's a state-funded program that aims to increase access to and distribution of naloxone, which is the opioid overdose reversal drug across the state. And Project Dawn has been able to secure funding to expand that in all the counties throughout Ohio. And the church where I pastored over the past few years got in on that and was able to become the 3rd official Project Dawn site in our county, along with the public health department and our local hospital. And the way it worked out for us was very simple, very accessible, very doable, for any congregation in our situation. And that's that the church just became basically a storage site where we keep naloxone, Narcan on hand. And so it's available if somebody wanted to come to the site or schedule a meeting to come and make a pickup. But we have a faith recovery navigator who actually does quite a bit of street outreach, is what we would refer to it as. So I'm able to supply her through the Project Dawn expansion with as much Narcan as she needs. And she has an extensive network in the county of people she knows, fellow people in recovery, people who are still actively using drugs, with whom she has a very strong relationship of trust. She stays basically on call 24/7. And if somebody needs Narcan, if it's for themselves or for a loved one or for something they know of going on in the community, they're able to contact her and she makes deliveries right to their door. So we've been privileged and blessed to be able to do that and provide her with that. We're right at the point now of trying to add another church in our county on to actually become a distribution site, more in more terms of actually having a ministry on hand where people will regularly come during like normal operating hours. And that's something I'm working with one of 2 churches in our county with now to get set up as well. But it's a very simple process. It's very easy to do. I think we've been able to be successful in expanding access to naloxone in our county, which is very vital at this point in time with the increasing overdose deaths that we're all very much aware of. And so I want to offer, those services here as well. Any of you that might be listening, pastors that are tuning into this series, we've done that expansion through Project Dawn in connection with the Healing Community Studies. The Healing Community Study out of the University of Cincinnati I'm actually a technical facilitator with that community study. So they actually pay me to spend some time working with faith communities and churches who are interested in becoming distribution sites for naloxone. So if there's any way that I can help you beyond just this information I'm sharing in this series, please reach out to me. I'll share my email in the chat, and then we can talk about that. Overall, I think it's very important among our churches and our faith communities that we create a culture of awareness. I think that's where it all begins. And I think that happens primarily in three ways, and that's what we've tried to do down here in Sauter County. First of all, that's just through education, like the education we've received in this series, in the Do No Harm series. If you're a part of a faith community, if you help lead a faith community, become a part of your local coalition. As the chairperson for the faith-based subcommittee of our local coalition, that's everything that we do. Is we provide resources, we provide tools, we provide education for our faith leaders and people of faith in our churches and our communities to have all of the equipping that they need to get involved. Storytelling is the second way, and this is I lean very hard on storytelling myself. We've led panel discussions in our county, featuring the stories of people in recovery, featuring the stories of impacted people with direct lived experience who are able to speak to the question of how the church has either hurt or helped them in their recovery process, so the clergy and faith leaders can come and sit and listen and learn to the needs of people who use drugs and who are most directly affected in their county. And I find a real deep, rich theological basis for this aspect of the work. We have to lead our people continually to these encounters with people that might be considered the other, right? And we see Jesus doing this all throughout Scripture. We see when he leads his disciples to encounter the Roman centurion or the Syrophoenician woman, people whom his disciples, being Jews as they were, might have considered other than them, outside of the covenant people of God. And Jesus was constantly leading his disciples to encounters with the other, the theological and spiritual other, to see and to show them how God was at work outside of their circle. And I think that's very important for people in communities of faith to see that there's lots of important work going on. God blessed, God ordained work going on, including harm reduction in our communities. And a lot of times is outside the scope of most of our awareness. And so we need to invite people in. We need to hear their stories. We need to lean hard on the storytelling aspect of this work so that we can get to know what are the needs of people who are affected by this crisis. And the theological reflection that I always turn to ultimately with this is Matthew 25. And Jesus said, whatever you have or have not done to what he called the least of these, it's not an expression that I particularly like, but what he just meant was the most vulnerable members of our communities, those who are sick, those who are in prison, in this case, those who may have substance use disorders, those who use drugs, those who have been impacted and negatively harmed by the war on drugs. Whatever you've done to them, whatever you've not done to them, you have done or not done unto Christ. And that's a very strong messaging there for people of faith. I believe Christ offers himself as a point of reference, as an object of faith for those of us who may be weak in our faith, those who are not able to just see the imago Dei, the image of God in their neighbor, just as they are. Christ says here, then see me in them, and whatsoever you have done or not done to them, you've done or not done to me. So that's pretty serious business to a Christian or to a person of faith. And I don't see how we can get around that imperative when we apply it to harm reduction and the work of recovery in our communities. So this is very important, and I want to leave you all with that, a very urgent call to action. People are dying. People are dying. Ohio is on course right now to set the record, for overdose deaths across our state. The pandemic, of course, is factored in there. It's exacerbating the situation, but most of these deaths through accidental drug overdose are entirely avoidable. Most of them are policy-related issues. They're things that we need to be aware of. They're things that we need to be active about. We need to get educated on here, and we need to be on the side of the poor. We need to be on the side of the people who are most directly affected, who are dying here. I know there are many people in our pews, in our churches, who don't really know what's going on, and we don't want to offend them, and we don't want to push them too hard, and we want to deal delicately with people's sensibilities. But like I said, people are dying. Our neighbors, our friends, our family, our brothers, our sisters are dying before their time, most, if not all of them, needlessly, unnecessarily. And the lives of our neighbors are more important than the sensibilities of the people in our pews. So I want to leave you with that. Jesus saves, so does naloxone. Harm reduction is a very tangible, practical way to put your faith in the living Christ, the one who raises the dead, into expression. So if I or any of the other panelists can help you practically to flesh this out, to figure out how you can do this among your faith community in your area, please, after this panel and beyond, reach out to us, share this out to all your network of people who may find it relevant. And I want to thank you again for your time. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Josh. I've heard you before, and I needed to hear that again. And it is an imperative. And I saw Nikki's head bouncing throughout. You know, I think you say it so beautifully. What we all know in our hearts, that what needs to happen and what the role of the church is. So we are so hopeful that through this series and through this education that we've been doing these past few weeks, that like we've been saying, if someone would just break the ice, we'll all go ice fishing, and we can all, move this forward and create a movement for this life-saving work that we can do. We can all do it. So I want to introduce Nikki Hogarth. Nikki, if you would introduce yourself. Nikki is from Delaware, Ohio, has presented with us before, but we wanted to make sure that more people are aware of the work that she's doing. And I'm hopeful, we have a small group tonight, and I'm hoping at the end, if people have questions that they want to ask, we can have a little bit of Q&A at the end. So Nikki?
Yeah, thank you, Leisha, and thank you again for having me. I always feel very humbled to be amongst this crowd and be offered the opportunity to share what we're doing here in Delaware. And I don't have the words of Pastor Lawson, but I wanted to share some of the things that we're doing that have been very tangible for our congregation and very manageable, I'll say. I think that the idea of harm reduction and stepping into some of these ministries can be a bit scary or overwhelming to some of our congregations. And I heed your call. This call is more important than the sensibilities of those in our pews. But we've been working to try to make it accessible for them to do this work. And so I wanted to share a couple of ways that we've been doing that. The first is through, well, both ways. I'll start off by saying by integrating harm reduction work into work we're currently doing, into ministries where our members are already serving and have relationships with the clients that they're serving. And so the first one is our Laundry Love Ministry. Our Laundry Love Ministry before COVID met once a month on the fourth Wednesday of the month. It's been so long, I almost forget when it was that we were gathering. We'd do laundry for 3 hours, we'd serve a meal and share that time together. And we began almost immediately serving a completely different population and dynamic than we might serve at our congregational meals or outreach meals that took place in the church. And we also immediately began finding needles in the laundromat, falling out of the clothing, falling out of the laundry baskets, small bags in the bathrooms, in the women's room, men's room. And so we, took this into consideration, and we're grateful that we had this opportunity to be in the lives of the individuals that were coming. And rather than saying, shut it down, we can't have volunteers. I mean, we have a kids corner set up. There's people running around. We worked with someone in the community to get Narcan to have on hand to be distributed at the laundromat. And that was our first step into the water, I'll say, to really begin doing harm reduction. Our congregational awareness did begin building before that moment, which allowed us to take that step, which I think is important. We had begun doing some work around reentry, mental health, and addiction. We converted our youth house into a women's sober house in partnership with a recovery housing foundation that came into town. So we had begun hearing some testimonies of women and men who were in recovery on a congregational level. So I think taking that step, but when I think back on it, we decided not to shut it down, but to move forward and say, we're going to love you through this. We're here right now and we'll be here afterwards. We started having, when there was a new clinic, methadone clinic, that opened up not too far from Delaware. We had them come and pass out flyers at Laundry Love. We have temp agencies and job opportunities come to Laundry Love. So it's become a hub of resource for the community. And I think offering the naloxone was a really important step for us to move forward. After that, that was in, let's say, February of this year that we began doing that. And then we began, as the pandemic moved forward, we began noticing that a lot of the folks that we were serving through our food delivery, and we have like a backdoor pickup, our meal deliveries were booming, but we were serving a lot of people that we knew were using as well. And so we were knocking on these doors to deliver meals, knowing the families well enough to know that, the mom was upstairs and the daughter was answering the door. And it was, we had relationships well enough to know what was going on. And so we just got approval from our session, which our session is our governing body, to begin including Narcan or wellness kits with our food distribution that we're doing right now. So we do that 4 times a month. And then we'll train the volunteers that are doing the food distribution to also have these kits on hand. So it won't be a stretch for us to talk to individuals about having these on hand if they need them. It will just be a training opportunity for our volunteers. So we're hoping to launch this in January. And we think because we have the relationships that we do in some of these communities and with the folks that come to the back doors of the church, that it'll have an immediate impact. And so those are 2 ways that we are integrating harm reduction into things that we're already doing, which for our congregation, and we're a 200-year-old mainline Presbyterian downtown church with an aging constituent. And so it's not always easy to move ideas through 200 years of tradition. And so for us, kind of moving into things that have a sense of comfort, but transforming them into something new has been a real workable option for us. And the last thing I want to share is, what has been an unfolding story of hope for us. I mentioned that we have it's called the Unity House, is the women's sober house across the street from our congregation. And we never require that any of the women in the home come to our church, or there's no requirement for our involvement or sponsorship of this. But we do have a lot of the residents who do come across the street and come worship with us. And a number of them have joined. One who joined a couple of years ago has recently graduated from the program, just got her first apartment ever, and was just this week offered a position within the congregation, within the church. So she's taking a really big step to get off, her Social Security and disability that she, counts on. She's taking a big risk, and she's taking a big risk and is so empowered by it. And I think that of course, not every church is a home for every person. But our church has changed, because I know that 4 years ago, I'm not sure that someone who was, walking that road would have felt comfortable in this 200-year-old congregation. So I know that, the fabric of who we are has changed because of this work. And that has been powerful for everybody involved. And so it's been a wonderful, honor to be a part of this ministry. So I just wanted to share kind of a story of hope to end with. So yeah. Wendy, you wrote a question. Did you want me to answer this now?
Sure. My question was, I was just asking Nikki if the denomination has become kind of more interested broadly in the harm reduction work, because if she's bringing it through the session, I was just curious if that had sparked conversations, or if you know of any other churches that were sort of interested or exploring this concept.
to answer that,
Not that you have to out them on this call, but I'm just curious.
well, what's really interesting, and I will be curious to see how this unfolds in 2021 is, Josh, you talked about Matthew 25. So 2 months ago, we adopted an identity as a Matthew 25 congregation, which is a commitment to love the other. And so to identify in what way do you want to engage this ministry, there's three primary thrusts and this is all supported by the presbytery. So they are supporting this concept of the Matthew 25 church, and we have recently adopted it. So we have a year-long study into Matthew 25, and undoubtedly, because I'm planning the year of studies, this will be part of that conversation. And I would guess that yes, as more churches dig into Matthew 25 and as we share what we are doing on a presbytery-wide level, it will become more on the radar, but I don't know of other, off the top of my head, Presbyterian churches that are actively doing harm reduction within my geographic area.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think right now, because of the difficulty that Ohio is facing in particular, and we have some other pastors that are in our networks that are also engaging with their peer clergy, men and women, and clergy people. I mean, that's becoming another opportunity. So,
yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you. You really help us see that the work that we're already doing can be transformed, through our awareness of the needs of the other. So it's a beautiful example, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that can, that builds hope for those that want to get involved and those that want to try to convince their church to get involved. And we do want to find ways that churches can become involved. Maybe not everyone is going to become a distribution site, but there are ways to participate. So thank you again. So next up we have Jack Schuler, who is from Denison University. Jack has written a book. This is Ohio. He's done great research, and this book is a wonderful resource for us that are in the work, and also as we do this education about what's happening in the world, how we got to this point, and then what Ohio looks like in the midst of all of this. So Jack, if you would share with us what you've been seeing through your travels and your research, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Leisha. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I really value the opinions of the folks who are on this call. They are, in many ways, they've been some of my most valuable sources through the years. I'm speaking here as a journalist who's been reporting on this crisis for a while now. So my comments are really based on my own reporting. So you can take it all with a grain of salt. And I would say, like, it's speaking to, this question of what's happening right now. It's clear that overdoses were on the rise before the pandemic hit. And it's only gotten worse. And I think there are a lot of reasons for this, but the primary reason is that the drug supply is full of illicit fentanyl, and it's a potent drug, and it's combined oftentimes with other drugs. And people who don't have as much experience with the drug, or maybe they've been, maybe they are quote unquote relapsing or using again, it can lead to overdose, right? And so, what we're seeing right now is in many ways the outcome of a war on drugs. It's the outcome of regulating opioids, opioid pills, that this is what we get, right? And I know that this is an ongoing effort to help set up churches as sites for naloxone distribution. And I think it's a good idea. I think any opportunity to get naloxone to people is a good idea. The reality is that just because you have naloxone doesn't mean it will get to people who use drugs necessarily. And I think that's something really important to think about, and to think about what that actually means for you, for your church, for your situation. The work of building trust and allyship is really the next step, and it is way more difficult, I think. I'm not going to talk too much about it here, but I invite folks who want to do this to think about what that means. It's clear that Josh and Nikki's churches have thought about this work already. I think Nikki's point that you begin, you know, you promote harm reduction with the people you already have relationships with, and I think that's really you know, a valuable idea, something to think about when if you already have meals, or you already have outreach opportunities, or you have an NA or AA group in your church. You know, these are people who you can maybe potentially partner with. There are safe ways to distribute. I think that some people that it kind of makes them nervous for various reasons. But you need to alert folks in your community that you have it. One thing that I've been seeing lately, that the coroner in Franklin County has been doing these in conjunction with a couple other groups that do harm reduction outreach. They've been hosting these pop-up distribution events on various days and times of the week, using social media to spread the word, but not doing it at the same time, doing it different days, catching different people. I think that's a useful way to begin. The other thing that I'm seeing is that there increasingly are apps. Some apps are community specific. I know that New York State has an app. I think Philly has its own app, but there's an app called Naloxone Find, and I believe they're using the Google map as its sort of basis, so it's everywhere. And you can set up an account pretty easily with this app. It's a safe way to signal that you have naloxone readily available. You register at the site, and when someone needs it, they'll ping you. And I can post a little bit of information about that in the chat in a second. I don't think it's widely used yet, but if you promote it with the right folks, it could work for your community, right? And it's available wherever you get apps, so you can just look it up. The other way, I think that one of the easiest ways is to use something like the Signal app, capital SIGNAL, and people can message you for pickups. I know that a lot of point-to-point sort of distribution models, that a lot of people use that. And this can be a handoff or a drop, maybe left in front of the church in a box or something, some special place where you leave naloxone. Signal is a private and safe method for texting, and would likely put the people you're serving at ease. And again, that's important. And I would also add that Josh's model of having a recovery navigator, a person deeply connected to the community with experience, a person who already has the relationships and connections working with you, is really important, right? It's really important. And those people are in your congregations, they're in your communities. Just start the conversation. Leisha also asked me to talk a little bit about, I don't know, my own perspective. You know, after writing this book and thinking about all this, she wanted me to let you know that there's going to be a reading group of This Is Ohio, which is a book about the overdose crisis and how it's played out here in Licking County, but also elsewhere in the state. And it's going to be, I think, the next step for the Do No Harm series. It starts on December 27th and will run for 3 weeks. And if anyone wants to sign up, they can email Leisha. And I can put her email in the chat too. Leisha has a number of copies if you need help getting access to the book. It's also widely available in bookstores around the country and online. I wanted to say that this book and these Advent events that y'all have been having over the last few weeks are related, I think, in many ways. To Christians, the story of Christ, of the Christ child, is one of hope. Not only for the season, but also hope for a broken world. And that hope is inherent in the message of Christ. I've always believed that love is not to be reserved, but that we are to see the light in everyone and to love everyone, even when it's hard to do. It's a radical idea. I think it's a really radical idea in a materialistic and aggressive world, the one that we live in. In a world that fosters hate, we're told that we're supposed to foster love. In a world that boasts, we're told to be humble. In a world that pushes away, we're told to embrace. And that's the message of harm reduction. That's it right there, right? To meet people where they're at, to love them, to give them what they need. At least, I mean, this is how I see it. And I think this is what I learned when I wrote the book. Harm reduction, you should know, has its roots in part in a movement to save lives, to save the lives of people dying from HIV/AIDS. And the people who did that work practice radical love in a way that I don't think a lot of us really really know or understand. When I was 17, I think 17 or 18 years old, a friend of my family died of HIV/AIDS, and in another city from where I lived, and there was a funeral for him. And I attended that funeral, and I remember I knew that going into the funeral that this is how he had died. And the pastor of that funeral did not mention what was going on, didn't mention the fact that the federal government was stalling on supporting, didn't mention any of these things. And I was really angry. Um, and what I didn't know at the time was that there were people like the people in New York City who set up on our street corner and were arrested because they were distributing clean syringes to people who needed them, to people who were, who were spreading HIV/AIDS, right? I mean, this is one of the ways that it was spreading at the time, and the city didn't want to set up a syringe exchange, even though it was, a model, something that worked and that had been studied all around the world, right? And they didn't want to do it. And so I think about these people who put themselves at risk, right, to save others. And I think about all of that. I think about that right now when we, give up a little bit of our safety or give it up a little bit of our comfort or whatever to save others, right? Just by giving them naloxone, right? So in this season, I hope that you'll look for and make these connections to the work that you're doing already or wish to do in the coming year. There's a reason why we're all here together, I think. I think we all are working towards a realization of this kind of love, even when it's difficult to do. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Jack.
So,
I think,
Wendy, yeah, please.
yeah, no. I mean, I was just thinking, the things that Jack was sharing, and the reflections that we've had so far, theologically here, that for Advent, this is the week of love. Our title was Grace and Compassion for All. I didn't say that in the beginning, but I also think like one of the things that most profoundly, I feel is most profound about the teachings of Christ and the Christian faith is not only love for the other and the vulnerable and the marginalized, but also of the enemy. And I'm not trying to say that drug users are our enemy, although I'm sure for some people they may feel that way. And in fact, sometimes people, when they're using drugs, may be committing crimes or harm to others and harm to themselves, but also harm to other people. And that does happen. I think we've had a lot of thoughts too about this work, about how it does, it gets tied up in our criminal justice system. And part of the stigma that's attached to this is also about, not only like the other and the uncomfortability with it, but also, sometimes the idea that these are our enemies and bad people that we need to get rid of and lock away and put away and punish. And I don't know, I feel like as for me as a Christian and for, maybe many people who are reflecting on this or tuning into this series. I think that's one of the most profound and sort of unique things about our faith. And I think as one of the most potential to change our culture and our environment, our world, and our dealings. And I think, at this moment, sometimes people just want to lean into the other and the enemy. And I feel like we're called to do something wholly different. And so showing compassion and care, regardless of what is happening with another person, even if they're harming you. And that's not to say we shouldn't have boundaries and we shouldn't, I'm not suggesting that, but being able to hold people with love and compassion and wanting the best for them and wanting healing for them and wanting good things for them, I think is what in life, at the very least for them, is something that we really are lifting up in this series. And so thank you for that, Jack.
Thank you. I want to share one thing, Wendy. So what is faith without works? What is faith without acts of love? I heard a story this week. I'm in Licking County, and someone in a group that I'm in had talked to our, I believe, the fire chief. And the fire chief was saying that people that are living out in the woods in tents, some people who are in active addiction, some that are, purely experiencing homelessness, but because of the pandemic and because of the isolation, they will call 911 because they don't know where else to turn. So the first responders are required to attend to that 911 call, and people are asking to be transported to the hospital so that they can get warm, so that they can get food, and have their needs attended to. So that was just a real wake-up call for me. This is happening now in this moment. In this time of Advent, we're in the darkness of this time of year. We have some time to reflect and to challenge ourselves to step out of our comfort zones and to listen to God's call and then to answer it. So we want to keep up with this work. We want to keep working with faith communities and pastors that want to get involved in this work, and we will continue on into 2021, and that's why we're starting the book study. And that book study will combine with our next action step. Wendy, if you want to address that.
Absolutely. So our book study is going to start on the December 27th, and we're going to continue to convene people. So we'll be sending out, well, if you're watching this on Facebook or if you happen to be in the Zoom call, you can certainly put comments in the chat or in the thread of Facebook, and we will follow up with you. But we will also be emailing it out to our database and to anybody who signed up for these series about the book study, or the book group rather. And then that will conclude on January 10th. And so on January 10th is when we'll also be inviting Blythe Barnow, who's with Faith and Public Life. She's the harm reduction manager guru over there, and she will be leading us through a naloxone safe service. I know some of the faith communities in our networks have participated in this before, but we're excited to make this one available to you kind of live on Zoom. And it's a service that, she had shared a bit in some of our previous meetings about it, where, we're honoring and remembering the lives of those that have been lost, and also sort of blessing, almost like when you lay hands and sort of send out people. So doing that around the sending out of the naloxone and kind of commissioning people out for this kind of work. And it's a really beautiful, reflective service that may be unlike any other that you've attended. And so we wanted to make that available to people online. And of course, she's more than welcome and interested in also following up with people if you'd like to have that type of service in your own congregation. So she'll be making herself available as well throughout the year. And then kind of in the new year in 2021, as we continue to work with faith communities on this call and in our network, we do believe we have at least 3 congregations in Licking, at least 3 in Muskingum. We have a handful in Columbus that are eager to be a part of either hosting the lock, having the lock zone and distributing it from their congregation, or providing a storage site in order to equip outreach workers like Josh was talking about, or even some combination of both, right? You have it on your site, you can obviously make it available to anybody in your congregation or anyone who comes requesting it, but you may also have a way of bringing it out to people more proactively than just reactively. And so I think that's something that we're very excited to explore with anybody else that's interested in that, as you're considering and sitting, sitting with yourself and sitting with these things and bringing this idea forward. We're excited to be a resource to you and provide a connection point and a network of support with other clergy and other faith leaders that you might be able to talk to as well. I don't know if we have any questions. We have a handful of people here on our Zoom, but we're also on Facebook Live. So if anybody has any questions, if you want to throw them in the chat, otherwise I think we can wrap up. And as a reminder, these videos are also made available again on the website at thinktanksonpoverty.com, and also they kind of live in the feed of our Facebook pages as well.
Thank you, Wendy. So if you are interested in participating in the book study, please send me an email. We do have books to distribute if you need a book, and we will come back together next Sunday at 6 for the first discussion of the book. And I believe Jack will be with us on that. And then if you want to register for the Naloxone Blessing service, which is happening on January 10th, again, this is virtual. And so we'll be able to tell you how you can link in to the Zoom or to Facebook. You just have to register the same way that you've registered for these, and then you can participate as well. And we think that this will be a really good culminating activity so that we can then launch the site and the work in the next phase. So do we have any questions, Wendy? I know we have the people in our chat. Okay, you go.
On the first Sunday for the book study, how much reading, how many chapters in are we? Are we supposed to have read by Sunday, or is that just like we're showing up and it's the beginning?
Jack, you have the guide that you developed. What you had said that we could we could do it in three sessions. You thought that would be comfortable? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we will put that together in an email and send that out to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. And if people need a book, if you don't have one, we can certainly sponsor you. You just need to ask. So. All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Fred. All right. Y'all have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you being with us, and happy holidays to everyone.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Good night.
Mm-hmm.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you all.
Night,
Good to
thank
see you,
you.
Josh. Nice to meet you, Nikki.
Thank you.